Our team is wrestling to fit Ramses' face back into his head to complete the third and final stage of reassembling their replica. It's a difficult task, made even harder by the desert winds.
No closer! I want to go up!
They're worried the L-shaped wedge will swing into the head and damage it.
Rich, get that back rope. Jerry can't do two at once.
Yeah. All right, we want to come down now?
Very, very slowly.
Oh, she's
Can you go redder? That way, that way.
Well, I can talk to him,
Okay,
Johnny. You
right,
gotta watch the front
okay.
leg. You probably need to boom down. It looks
Is he
like.
booming down then? Whoa, 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 whoa.
Tell the crane to do it.
Okay, right. We're going to drop it. We're going to take it close to that edge.
Now hold it. Watch it.
Looking good.
Got probably 2 inches, 3 inches on my side. You need that? I'm really tight on my side here.
Okay. All right. You okay?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, you're about 1.5 inches away from your cut.
Come on down with it.
That's it, baby.
We're good, we're good, we're there.
Come on, put him in.
That's it right there. Done.
There you go.
1, 2, 3, Ramesses. Hey.
The original move involved hundreds of delicate operations like this. It took an exhausting 19 months to completely reassemble the temples. Then they had to disguise their handiwork. There were 6 miles of cuts between the temple blocks that all needed to be filled with mortar to cover up any signs of surgery. On the 31st of October, 1968, 4.5 years after it started, and an astonishing 20 months ahead of schedule, the project is completed. Just as everyone hoped, Abu Simbel is not only restored to its former glory, it looks like the temples have never been moved.
Ramesses II must have been absolutely happy with this project. Seeing the whole world coming to save one of his monuments, and to save it not only for the time being, but for posterity, and all these thousands and thousands and millions of tourists that would come, they don't only mention the temple of Ramesses II, but the project that got the whole world together to save the monument.
They were clever 3,000 years back, and they carved this out of the rock. They were not so bad either when we moved them.
Finally, the engineers face the ultimate moment of truth. When they find out whether the Great Temple has been correctly realigned to still allow the sun to shine through to the inner sanctuary on those 2 days of the year. There can be no greater testimony to the triumph of this greatest of all moves. Today, the sun's rays still strike the faces of the 3 sacred statues, just as they have always done for 3,000 years, and will do for centuries to come.
This is the National Geographic Channel.
Ancient Egypt. Powerful, majestic, and mysterious. Thriving for over 2,000 years, leaving the symbols of its greatness written on the desert in stone. Built by the sweat and toil of thousands, inspired by the conviction that man can survive death. Behind two of the greatest monuments stand two very different pharaohs. One, an undisputed god-king, reigns over an Egypt blessed by peace and prosperity. He harnesses an entire nation to forge his chariot to the afterlife. The other rules in turbulent times. A warrior king, tested in the heat of battle, and a gifted politician. Born more than 1,000 years apart, both men are united by a single goal: the ultimate prize, eternal life. "2,500 years before Christ, Snefru, one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, dies. This is not a tragic moment, but a triumphant new beginning. For now, Snefru is more than just a king. He is a divine being. And his death allows him to join Egypt's gods in the heavens. There he will live forever. The immortality of the pharaoh is fundamental to the ancient Egyptians' belief system. And in order to reach the afterlife, the pharaoh's body must be preserved and buried in a pyramid. More than just a tomb, the pyramid is designed to be a magical resurrection chamber. There his remains must stay untouched for all eternity, to nourish his spirit after death. The pharaoh's rebirth as a god is crucial not just for him, but for every Egyptian. From the afterlife, he will guard over his people for all time. The quest for immortality is as old as Egypt itself. The forerunners of the pyramids were modest rectangular tombs called mastabas, made out of mud bricks. But as Egypt grew wealthier, the tombs became grander. And the pharaohs had to ensure that theirs were the grandest of all. Placing one mastaba on top of another created a tomb fit for a pharaoh, and the first basic pyramid was born. Under Snefru's long reign, it not only becomes the wealthiest nation in the region, but also a country with secure borders. And the source of this prosperity is one of the greatest rivers on earth, the Nile. Packed with fish, a key trade route, and a farmer's dream. Its annual floods carry life-giving water and fertilizing mud.
Egypt is the gift of the Nile, and basically the rest of Egypt is just one large chunk of desert.
The Nile is Egypt's lifeblood, its highway, the reason why Egypt survives in the middle of the world's largest desert, the Sahara.
The Egyptians believe that the reason for their good fortune is their pharaoh, who has a direct link to the gods.
The fact that the Nile flooded was in part due to things being right in the world in a cosmic sense, in a sense that the gods were placated, they were happy, things were being done correctly.
And if the gods aren't happy, the consequences would be tragic. The Nile would dry up, and desert sand would engulf the entire country. (2551 BC), The powerful Snefru has died, and his young son ascends to the throne. His name is Khufu, and he'll enjoy unconditional power over his people.
Khufu has more power and authority than any other ruler in Egyptian history or perhaps world history. He's a living god with absolute command over all of his subjects.
To ensure that Egypt continues to prosper, even after his death, Khufu must build a pyramid, and he's determined that it will outshine his own father's impressive tomb.
Khufu is looking at this and thinking, you know, I can do it better. I can learn from the mistakes that my father made. I can build something bigger, grander, something that will really capture the attention of both my own people and anyone coming into Egypt.
North of Egypt's ancient capital, Memphis, on a remote plain in Giza, Khufu unveils an ambitious vision to his chief engineer. A giant pyramid, the biggest single stone structure the world has ever seen. It will be his resurrection chamber and an awe-inspiring testimonial to his reign.
This is a monument that Khufu is making to say, here I am, look at me, I am king, I have power, I have wealth. On the other hand, it's also his tomb. And Khufu's thinking about the fact that he needs a place where he can transform, where he can rise into the afterlife, join with the gods.
He's taking a big gamble. A pyramid so huge will take decades to complete, and in ancient Egypt, even a pharaoh can die young.
Even as a young man, it's vitally important that Khufu start his pyramid and finish it during his lifetime. He doesn't know how long he will rule. He could die at any time.
Egypt is littered with tombs and monuments left half-finished after a pharaoh's unexpected death. If Khufu doesn't live to see his pyramid completed, his dreams of immortality will be crushed, and Egypt's future cast into doubt. To have any chance of completing such a huge project in time, Khufu needs an enormous workforce. Around 25,000 healthy young men. It will be the greatest mobilization that Egypt has ever seen. Egypt's people are free, but Khufu has thousands of foreign captives from incursions into Libya and Nubia. It's an enduring myth that these captives built the Great Pyramid. But it's not true. Modern-day analysis of DNA taken from the bones of the workers proves that they were not foreigners, but native Egyptians. Khufu knows that resentful prisoners won't produce the motivated workforce he needs. Instead, he speaks to the Egyptian people's own self-interest.
To actually be somebody who is helping guarantee that the current pharaoh will pass successfully into the next world is quite an important contribution to society. And it's a part of the cosmic insurance policy, if you like, for an Egyptian to make sure his king is properly buried, and therefore to work on his pyramid. It has a very definite personal importance.
If Khufu's people can help secure their pharaoh's place in eternity, the gods will not forget.
It's an honor to work on a pyramid, and it's a privilege, and you're also getting religious credit by doing so. So if you have been involved in pyramid building, you, whether you are a peasant or whether you're from a higher level, will be blessed by the gods personally for doing this work.
But there's a problem. With so many young men leaving Egypt's farms, the engine of the kingdom's wealth, the economy could be crippled. Khufu and his team come up with a clever solution. And like everything else in Egypt, there lies at its heart the ceaseless ebb and flow of the Nile. They will organize the building schedule around the river's flood season. Every year the Nile floods, irrigating and enriching huge swaths of the Nile Valley. The floods make the soil fertile, but they also mean that farmers cannot work the land for up to 4 months of the year. Khufu can offer an attractive alternative to months of unpaid inactivity.
The annual flood of the Nile is terribly important for building the pyramid because when the Nile is flooding, there are 3 months or 4 months out of the year where the peasants can't really work the land. So the king very cleverly has organized it so that during those 4 months where they would be out of work anyway, they can actually be gainfully employed.
Scheduling the most labor-intensive periods of the build around the flood season is a solution that promises to keep everyone happy. The Nile is also the swiftest way to transport men and materials. This ancient waterway, over 4,000 miles long, will feed the pharaoh's grand project. Even so, the building site at Giza stands over a mile from its banks. The engineer's solution? A canal system, carved through the desert that creates a conduit for supplies. Khufu's choice of a pyramid-shaped monument is suffused with powerful religious symbolism. To ancient Egyptians, the classic pyramid shape symbolizes the creation of the world. They believe that the earth was originally one vast ocean. The first part of the land to rear up out of the water was a great mountain. The Egyptians named it Tajennen and made it one of their gods. Like the Garden of Eden, this place was harmonious and blissful, an earthly paradise. This primeval state of perfection was known as Mat. A pyramid shape echoes the emerging land and represents this perfect state.
Math is basically truth or order, the right way as opposed to the way of chaos. So for the Egyptians, one balances Ma'at, which is order, against chaos, and the world is always chaotic, and the king has to maintain this balance between the two.
Khufu must build a pyramid that strictly follows the rules of Mat. Mat is the magical spark that will transform a giant pile of stones into a chariot to the afterlife. His first critical act is to align the pyramid with the heavens, home of the gods. The first and greatest of the gods to be honored is the sun god Ra, the deity who carries the sun across the sky from the east to the west. When the pyramid is completed, the east and west walls will face the rising and setting sun, honoring Ra's daily journey. But the east-west alignment is not the most important. Khufu and his priests believe that although the perfect state of Mat is rarely achieved on Earth, it can be found in the night sky, at the site of their North Star, Tuban.
By configuring it to point towards the North Star, it makes a stronger connection between his own preservation of order and the order in the heavens.
It's essential that Khufu's pyramid points directly at this seemingly immovable star. If Khufu's astronomers get it wrong, his resurrection machine will be fatally flawed. While their farmland is flooded with the Nile's waters, the men of ancient Egypt appear from every corner of the kingdom to converge on Giza. At the time, this was the largest workforce ever assembled. On the word of one man, they'll toil for 2 decades to build the most daring human creation in history. Failure will spell doom for their pharaoh and for their nation. 2551 BC. Thousands of men from all over Egypt report to the site of Khufu's Great Pyramid. The scorching heat of the Giza Plain will be home to some of them for decades. They must build Khufu's resurrection chamber in record time. before death can cheat their pharaoh of his birthright, eternal life. As his engineers mark out the pyramid's ground plan, the workers get their first glimpse of the scale of the task ahead. And it's not a comforting sight.
The thoughts going through one's mind when looking out over the Giza Plateau on sort of almost day one, those thoughts must be, how on earth are we ever going to do this? It's fairly daunting to think, okay, there's nothing here now. In 20 years we're going to have a mountain here.
But these men must not only finish the build before Khufu dies, they must ensure they construct a perfect pyramid. Only then can their pharaoh make his journey to the afterlife. And erecting such a huge structure has many pitfalls, as Khufu's own father learned. Snefru might have finally achieved the first perfect pyramid in his Red Pyramid, but he made some major mistakes along the way. His first attempt at a true pyramid ended in disaster. He located the structure on soft sand, but as the sides rose, the foundation started to crack. The builders had to act fast. In a desperate bid to lessen the load, they made the angle of the pyramid sides less steep. They headed off total collapse, but at a price. The pyramid's glaringly imperfect shape broke the rules of Mat, making it useless as a resurrection chamber. Snefru was lucky enough to reign for 50 years, long enough to start over and finally achieve his goal. But Khufu knows that he might get just one shot at getting his pyramid right. And priority number one is to find a solid foundation.
Khufu's definitely looking to not repeat the mistakes his father made. He's looking for a place where the limestone foundation is a bit stronger, where he can actually use that to his advantage to construct an enormous monument.
In a land made up mostly of mud and sand, Khufu's scouts find the perfect spot: the stony plateau of Giza. Giza's bedrock promises Khufu a solid foundation in place of the shifting sands and subsidence his father faced. But it also brings another big bonus: an inexhaustible supply of top-quality limestone. A quarry right on the pyramid's doorstep will cut millions of man-hours from the project.
Khufu may be thinking, you know, my sons could build here as well. I can set up a sort of family generation of tombs on this one site because the plateau is so large. And I can house my workforce nearby. I can put them off at the edge of the plateau near to the cultivation area. And so it's a site that has a lot of different things going for it.
The pyramid will swallow almost 2.5 million blocks of limestone, weighing an average of 2.5 tons each. Some of the blocks at the base of the pyramid are even bigger, as much as 15 tons. Khufu and his engineers have a solid foundation and an abundance of stone, but they still face a big challenge. They must ensure that every layer is completely level. If they discover it is rising even slightly out of line, it will be imperfect, useless. They'll be back to square one, and Khufu's dreams of immortality will be ruined. Egyptologists believe that his engineers used a primitive but effective leveling device. 2 pieces of wood, the same length, are fixed to a crosspiece, creating an isosceles triangle, and a mark is made exactly halfway on the crosspiece. A plumb line hung from the apex will intersect the crosspiece at the halfway mark only when it's placed on a level surface. The instrument, called a square level, allows the engineers to check that each layer is perfectly horizontal. Khufu's great project starts to take shape. Each side of the pyramid base is over 2 football fields long, and yet the foundations are almost perfectly horizontal, deviating from perfection by less than 1 inch. At the quarry face, workers have barely begun a task that will take decades to complete. Each limestone block must be hacked out of the rock face and cut to size at the quarry. The schedule demands that the teams of quarrymen cut and deliver 1 stone block every 3 minutes to the pyramid. Luckily, limestone is easier to cut than many kinds of stone, since the workers have only the simplest of tools: primitive stone pounders and chisels made of copper, a relatively soft metal. The ancient Egyptians distrust innovation. They have used the same tools to cut stone for centuries, and it will be another 500 years before they make bronze and create a new generation of much tougher tools. Like their predecessors, Khufu's builders will rely on dogged persistence and sheer numbers to succeed.
The fundamental thing about Egyptian technology at this time is its practical technology. They don't really go in for speculative stuff. It's what do we need to get the job done, and that's really as far as they wish to go.
Rock cutting is one thing, but now the Egyptians face a much bigger test of their deeply traditional technology: how to lift millions of tons of stone to heights up to 400 feet. Khufu's engineers face a puzzle: how to get 6 million tons of stone up the side of the growing pyramid. Their neighbors, the Sumerians, have been using wheeled carts for over 1,000 years. And Khufu's engineers were certainly aware of the technology. They could have used carts to help in their task. Instead, their cautious outlook makes them resist innovation. They build an enormous ramp and drag the blocks on wooden sleds. The ramp is made from quarried rubble and stone and lined with wooden treads to help the sled move more easily. The ramp and sled system has been around for 60 years, and it allows 20 men to haul 2-ton blocks of stone up the side of the pyramid. It does the job, but it's a low-tech, labor-intensive solution that's brutally tough on the workers.
No matter how you cut it, building a pyramid is back-breaking work. We actually have the bones of some of the men that built these pyramids, and they all show the strain and stress of its construction.
The workers' skeletons are a grim record of their lives. broken or deformed bones, severed limbs, damaged spines. Tests suggest that the men's average lifespan was just 32 years, compared to 55 for a member of the nobility. The blocks arrive at the pyramid unfinished. The underneath and one side are carved flat, but on-site masons finish the other surfaces, smoothing the top to create the next perfectly level surface. Relying on such primitive building methods is a risk. If the pyramid is unfinished when Khufu dies, he will not reach the afterlife. Khufu's solution is sheer manpower. Around 25,000 men will work on his grand project, 4,000 cutting, hauling, and finishing stone, and more than 20,000 in support jobs. In fact, over the course of a year, around 1 in 30 of Egypt's male population will work on the pyramid. Housing such a big workforce in a remote spot isn't easy, but Khufu's solution is characteristically single-minded. He orders an entire town to be built, just half a mile from the pyramid site. For some, such as stonemasons and other master craftsmen, it will be home for the next 20 years. Accommodations may be basic, but the town has a sophisticated infrastructure with bakers, potters, and brewers, even teachers and physicians.
If you're coming to work in the pyramid for 2, 3, 10 years, you have your entire family housed there. Your children will have to go to school there. You will have medical facilities, there'll be places for entertainment. All the women will have their jobs, so it is a very large, thriving, bustling city.
Each worker gets a daily ration of 10 loaves per family and a beer ration. To peasant farmers, this is the high life.
All the people who are working for the king are being very well fed, much better than if they had stayed home and remained peasants on the land, because the king gives them meat and poultry and fish and bread and beer, plus extra rations that they can send back to their extended families at home. So they are really getting food fit for a king.
Turning thousands of men into an effective, coherent workforce is perhaps a bigger challenge than the build itself. The Egyptians achieve a level of coordination and efficiency that would put many modern building projects to shame.
One of the most impressive things about the pyramids is not just the masonry and the building technology that goes into it, but the organizational and bureaucratic technology that can manage a giant workforce and have all these people do what they're supposed to do at exactly the right time.
Is their ability to organise, because no rabble would ever have been able to build even any of the pyramids, given if they were given a century to do so.
Khufu and his officials have devised a complex chain of command to ensure that everything runs like clockwork. They divide the main workforce into 2 crews of 2,000. These crews are then split into 2 gangs, and these are divided down further, finally reaching units of 10. The system ensures every man knows his daily objectives and who he reports to. The basic 10-man unit is the ideal number to work on a single block, making it the driving force of the build. Splitting workers into these small groups makes the project easier to control, and it has an added bonus. Supervisors can now improve their work rate by introducing a little competition. The team that hits the supervisor's target first will win a tempting prize: extra beer rations.
There definitely are psychological tricks that are in play here. Ways to get these guys to work faster, ways to get them to compete a little bit, to get that stone raised a little higher, to get that extra block in place before the end of the day.
10 years into the build, the pyramid is rising at an impressive rate. But the builders are about to face their toughest problem. To ensure that Khufu reaches the next world, they must construct a special chamber deep inside the pyramid. A place filled with powerful magic that must also serve a more earthly purpose: to keep the pharaoh safe from those who would steal his remains. In 2540 BC, the world's largest building project is beginning to take shape. Thanks to Khufu's soaring ambition and his workers' dogged perseverance. Today, the pharaoh is visiting the site. For his workforce, it's a truly momentous occasion.
King's person has definitely sort of supernatural aura about it. So if you were doing work on the pyramid and he was appearing, that certainly would have been quite something to tell your grandchildren about.
The pyramid is approaching its most critical phase, and one that goes to the heart of its purpose. Deep in its core, engineers are building Khufu's burial chamber. It will house his mummified body and valuable ritual items to speed his journey to the afterlife. Although Khufu will join the gods at death, it's vital that his body remains preserved and untouched. If it is harmed or removed, his eternal soul will perish, and his people will face ruin. But the sheer visibility of a pyramid makes it a giant billboard for a pharaoh's treasure-filled tomb. A magnet for those who would desecrate a pharaoh's final resting place. Egypt's first pyramid, the Step Pyramid, was created by the pharaoh Djoser. His builders excavated nearly 100 feet into the bedrock beneath the pyramid to create a secret burial chamber for his remains. But when archaeologists finally discovered it in 1837, they found that robbers had gotten there first, stealing the pharaoh's valuables and his mummy. Khufu is determined he will not meet such a terrible fate. His remains will be held in the most impregnable vault ever created. To deter the tomb robbers, his engineers construct it from granite, specially sourced from a quarry 580 miles away. It's harder than steel and nearly impossible to tunnel through. But it's not enough to set Khufu's mind at rest. He orders the chief engineer to devise another set of secret security features. When the pharaoh's body is placed in the burial chamber, a series of 3 granite slabs will crash down, sealing him inside. As a second line of defense, another series of giant blocks will be released to barricade the grand gallery that links the chamber with the outside. It will turn Khufu's resurrection chamber into a fortress. But the engineers discover a flaw in the design of the burial chamber itself. The granite roof weighs 450 tons, but it's not strong enough to take the weight of the pyramid pressing down from above. Cracks appear, indicating a catastrophic collapse. They do some quick thinking and devise a series of stress-relieving chambers 68 feet high above the burial chamber. At the top, huge support beams channel the immense load away from the chamber. "18 years have passed since a young and ambitious pharaoh set out to build the greatest monument the world has ever seen. He has survived to see his pyramid reach an impressive height, but it's not finished yet. His workers still have many months of hard labor ahead of them. Highly skilled stonemasons encase the rough-hewn stepped blocks with white limestone. They must ensure the casing stones fit against each other perfectly, with no visible gaps. Then they meticulously carve and polish the limestone to a perfectly smooth finish. Their chisels are just 1/3 of an inch wide. Full-time chisel sharpeners toil alongside the stonemasons to keep them supplied with freshly honed blades.
The casing stones, which when they're added to pyramids, change their appearance completely. Rather than being sort of fairly dull, these casing blocks are fairly highly polished, and with the sun in the right direction, they almost make the pyramid gleam, almost like it's made of polished silver.
All this effort has a deeper purpose than mere cosmetics.
Anyone approaching Khufu's pyramid after it's been sealed up will have no idea how on earth anything could have been placed inside it, or how you would even try to get into it. It'll just be one huge, smooth-sided pyramidal structure.
When the casing is complete, it will conceal all trace of the entrance to Khufu's chamber. His pyramid will be a giant, inscrutable puzzle. If anyone ever discovers the key, it will mean the end of Khufu's dreams of immortality. On a desolate plateau in Giza, it's been 20 years since the young pharaoh Khufu set in motion his grand plan. Now his dream has become a reality. He has survived to see his resurrection chamber completed, winning his race with death.
Khufu in the end was probably the most audacious of pharaohs. If he wanted to be guaranteed to have a complete pyramid when he died, he should have built a smaller one. But in fact, he built the largest ever built. There was no guarantee that he was going to live long enough to see it even half complete.
Combining simple technology with extraordinary resolve and determination, Khufu's people have delivered his vision.
The fact that you've probably outdone what your grandfather did when he was working for Snefru must have given a certain intense satisfaction there, and possibly also feeling that having done it that much, probably nobody's ever going to quite manage something quite that big again.
The Egyptians are rejoicing. The pyramid is complete. The afterlife of the king is ensured. He will join with the gods. He will preserve order in the afterlife. So this is a time when all of Egypt is in celebration.
Khufu's pyramid at Giza is the tallest structure in the world and will remain so for 4,000 years. Just 3 years after seeing his pyramid completed, Khufu dies. He's still only in his 40s. For over 2 decades, an entire country has been working and planning for this one moment, laying their pharaoh to rest in his resurrection chamber. They hope his body will remain here for eternity, and they're convinced that his spirit will now ascend to the heavens. The engineers created 2 shafts over 200 feet long on either side of the chamber. The Egyptians believe the pharaoh's spirit will soar through the shafts and out of the pyramid. His destination, the stars in the heavens, to take his rightful place at last among the gods. There he will repay his people's great sacrifice by guarding over them for eternity. Khufu's son and grandson continue the dynastic tradition, building their own pyramids on the Giza Plateau. But none of them can surpass his extraordinary monument. It remains the high point of Egypt's pyramid building drive and cements Khufu's divine status. Centuries after his death, he's still worshipped as a powerful god. The enigmatic Sphinx, carved from an outcrop of rock at Giza, may even be a tribute to this legendary god-king. After Khufu's reign, Egypt enjoys almost 400 years of peace and prosperity. And then the unthinkable happens. The River Nile, Egypt's beating heart and the source of all its wealth, starts to dry up.
Egypt's prosperity fundamentally relies on the Nile flood. If the Nile flood is too high or too low, famine's going to result. You're either not going to have your crops properly watered or everything's going to be washed away. Nowadays, it's fairly clearly understood that that is what brought it all to an end.
As the mighty Nile is reduced to a trickle, crop failure and famine descend. And the people's faith in the pharaoh as the all-powerful god-king and source of order is shattered.
Kings lose control. They no longer are perceived as being strong and powerful the way Khufu certainly was in his day. They can't control what's happening.
Egypt's once impregnable empire now comes under attack on its eastern flank from an enemy called the Hyksos. The invaders are armed with superior weapons, horse-drawn chariots, more powerful bows and swords that outclass the Egyptians' old-fashioned arms.
They are a conquering force. They come with chariots that the Egyptians haven't seen before. They come with composite bows that have much better range and accuracy. They come with a force that catches Egypt by surprise.
Egypt has been slow to adopt new technology, like wheeled vehicles. Now it pays for its inflexibility. The country falls to the invaders.
You have something which has never occurred before, and which Khufu certainly never would have thought to have occurred, that you have non-Egyptians in control of a significant portion of the country.
The Hyksos rule for over a century. But at last, the Egyptians managed to expel them. The Nile has recovered and feeds the land once more. New leaders emerge and are crowned as god kings. But the bond between the pharaoh and the people has undergone an irrevocable change. It is 1295 BC, 12 centuries after the glory days of Khufu. Egypt is now ruled by the great pharaoh Seti. Today, Seti's priests are anointing his young son Ramses as co-ruler and heir to the throne. The ceremony means that Ramses will now reign alongside his father over what is called the New Kingdom. Like Khufu, Ramses and his father are still officially treated as living gods with absolute power. But under the surface, the people have doubts. In Khufu's era, Egypt knew nothing but peaceful prosperity, and pharaohs took the credit. But the cataclysmic events of the intervening centuries showed the people that their god kings were not all-powerful after all.
The single-minded divine image of the pharaoh, the pyramid building age, had gone. Although still a divine being, in the New Kingdom, he is a little bit closer to earth. Ramesses was clearly aware of that.
Ramses lives at a time when Ma'at, or order, has returned. The Nile is bountiful, and taxes flow into the royal coffers. But the future is uncertain. The new Egypt is now just one of many competing powers jostling for control in the region. To the west, it faces the Libyans. To the east, the Hittites and the Assyrians. And to the south, the troublesome province of Nubia. Egypt's new pharaoh-in-waiting knows that divinity is no longer enough. If he is to protect his kingdom and keep the people's loyalty, Ramses must learn the skills of a politician and a warrior. Ramses is being groomed by his father, the great pharaoh Seti, to inherit the throne of Egypt's new kingdom.
I'm sure Ramses can't wait to become pharaoh. He's getting one of the best training that any future pharaoh ever got at the hands of his father Seti I, who very carefully prepares him for the throne. But of course, he wants to have the top job for himself.
Egypt has changed since Khufu's day. Pyramids are out of fashion, and its rulers no longer enjoy unconditional loyalty.
In Ramses' day, Pharaoh has to work much harder at public relations. He can't afford to hide in his palace and let the monuments do talking for him. He has to appear regularly before his people in very carefully stagecraft ceremonies, yet regularly so that they can see that he exists.
But one thing is unchanged. Great building projects are still central to the pharaoh's authority and his route to immortality. "400 miles south of Giza lies one of the key centers of Seti and Ramses' rule, Karnak on the Nile. This is the temple complex at Karnak. Seti and his son have expanded an old religious site to create the biggest temple ever built and crowned it with one of the great engineering achievements of the ancient world, the hypostyle hall. Tombs are still important to pharaohs, but they now believe building a great temple is the surest path to the afterlife. This one has 134 massive columns, the tallest more than 70 feet high. They're so huge It takes around 7 people holding hands to span the circumference of a single column. Yet Seti's engineers used deceptively simple methods to build the hall. As the column sections arrived from the quarry, the builders stood one on top of the next. As the walls grew in height, they filled the temple with sand to raise the floor so that each new section could be easily set in place. When the roof slabs were on, the workers removed the sand, finishing the columns on the way down. Like the pyramid, Karnak Temple symbolizes the search for perfection and order within chaos. It's also home to the gods themselves. They live in the inner sanctum, where only the pharaoh and his high priest may enter. And there's been another religious development. It's now considered essential for the pharaoh to be immortalized in stone and paint. These images offer a home for the spirit after death. Seti entrusts his son Ramesses with an important job, the decoration of the hypostyle hall. This is no superficial paint job. Its imagery will transform it into a potent source of religious and political power.
The temples are where the pharaoh projects his image. They're the billboards in which he can advertise his glory and also his faithfulness to the gods. In part, he's trying to impress the gods themselves, not just the general populace, so he has 2 audiences.
The great columns are carved to resemble giant papyrus plants. They represent the primeval marshland that covered the earth at the dawn of creation. In 1290 BC, the pharaoh Seti dies suddenly. His son is crowned sole ruler of Egypt. Like every pharaoh before him, the young Ramesses expects to reach the afterlife and become a god, but he also nurses more worldly ambitions. He wants to go down in history as the greatest pharaoh who ever lived. And he knows that in this new era, building great temples is not enough. He must also prove himself through warfare.
Ramses, when he accedes to the throne and becomes king himself, now it's his turn to shine. It's his turn to show the Egyptians and to show the other powers of the Near East that he is a powerful pharaoh, that he can compete on the world scale. And Ramses must have thought, I can create for myself an empire of magnificent proportions. I'm not just going to be immortalized in stone, but I'm going to be immortalized by means of how far afield I can rule.
Ramesses is no military novice. For over a decade, he's been commander of Egypt's army. The world's largest professional fighting force. These are Ramesses' elite officers, who will spearhead his campaign of expansion by force.
Hello.
They are highly trained, super fit warriors, able to endure long, hard months of fighting far from home. Just 4 years into his reign, the young king unleashes his forces to Egypt's east. He quickly subdues a string of small city-states in Canaan, modern-day Israel, securing a lucrative trading corridor. Ramses' victories swell the royal coffers, and he swiftly embarks on an epic building program to thank the gods and to proclaim his triumphs.
The amazing thing about Ramses is how confident he is when he becomes king. He's a young king, untried, and yet he hits the ground running. He immediately launches into this huge building program, very ambitious, and starts fighting wars overseas.
You have this balancing act happening, where you need to have a strong military in part to ensure that the wealth keeps coming into Egypt so that you can send that wealth off to your temples and thank Amun-Ra for helping you to have this huge empire.
At Luxor, near Karnak, he restructures the temple, creating a great court filled with colossal statues of himself. And in front of them, he erects 2 giant obelisks, carved from single slabs of pink granite. Ramses is riding high. He has scored some memorable conquests, but if he is to be remembered as the greatest pharaoh ever, then he must reach new heights. He decides to take his campaign to Egypt's most feared enemy, an adversary his father fought epic battles against, a legendary warrior race and the only power in the region to match Egypt, the Hittites. Ramses II, the young king of Egypt, is preparing to take his country to war with the Hittites, its greatest enemy and rival superpower. His father Seti won a famous victory over the Hittites, commemorated on the walls of Karnak Temple when he captured the important border town of Kadesh. But the Hittites later won it back, a reversal the Egyptians cannot forget.
Kadesh is a strategic location in Syria, but there's something in the Egyptian psyche that I think makes them obsessed with Kadesh.
Kadesh sits on the border between Egypt and the Hittite kingdom, ruled by King Muwatallis. Whoever controls it also controls the surrounding prime agricultural land, an area known today as the Bekaa Valley. 5 pharaohs have tried to secure this crucial strategic prize. Now the young Ramses stakes his reputation on succeeding where so many of his predecessors failed.
Ramses has a lot riding on Kadesh. He is a young pharaoh. The Egyptians are after one of the richest valleys and richest territories in that area. That's the prize catch. If they control Kadesh, they control the rest of the territory as well.
Just 5 years into his reign, Ramses marches his army 400 miles out of Egypt to a plain west of Kadesh. Ramses' spies inform him that the Hittite king Muwatallis commands an awesome force. 37,000 foot soldiers, supported by 2,500 chariots. Muwatallis is sure to respond to this incursion. But the young pharaoh has reason to be confident.
The army that Ramses II is mustering to go against Kadesh is the ultimate army. It's vastly superior and vastly different from anything which came before it.
The Egyptians have at last embraced new technology. They were introduced to the chariot during the Hyksos invasion and adapted it to cope with sandy terrain, creating a formidable weapon. This chariot is lightweight, highly maneuverable, and above all, fast. Riding alongside the charioteer is the archer, armed with a new composite bow that combines wood and bone for added flexibility and power. The new design means that arrows can be delivered with deadly accuracy and enough power to punch through the bronze armor of the Hittites. Alongside the chariots march the infantry, carrying another updated weapon, the khopesh, a short sword with a fearsome curved blade. Weapons made of soft Egyptian copper have been transformed by the addition of imported tin. The resulting bronze alloy is much harder and sharper. Now Ramses is about to put these weapons to the test in his biggest challenge yet. If he can capture Kadesh, the young king will become a legend among his people, and the spoils will fund a building program to ensure his name lives forever.
It is a do-or-die situation for him. He needs to prove that Egypt is in control, both to the Hittites, but also to his own followers, also to the people in Egypt.
As Ramses and his army approach Kadesh, he receives encouraging news. The Hittite army is 120 miles away. The town stands unprotected. Kadesh is his for the taking. Impatient for victory, Ramses splits away from his troops and takes a single division to within striking distance of the town. He orders a second division to circle around to the north in a pincer-like action. But just as victory seems within his grasp, the picture changes. Egyptian scouts find 2 spies hiding in a nearby forest. When the men are interrogated, they reveal the truth. Ramses has fallen into a Hittite trap.
The fact of the matter is that the Hittite king is hiding behind the city of Kadesh, at Old Kadesh, and waiting to ambush Ramses.
The Hittites strike hard and fast before Ramses can regroup his forces. The young pharaoh faces a disastrous defeat. But just as the Hittites seem poised to crush the Egyptians, he has a stroke of luck. At the last moment, his second division swoops down from the north and takes the Hittites by surprise. Buoyed up by their arrival, Egypt's scattered troops regroup and fight back with everything they've got. A legendary battle ensues.
With the armies of these 2 ancient superpowers fighting each other directly, this was probably the largest military engagement in world history up to that time.
The battle between Ramses II and the Hittites is enormous. You've got massive amounts of slaughter on both sides.
The battle claims thousands of lives, but at the end of the day, there is no outright victor. The next day, Ramses and King Muwatallis face off across the desert plains. The massed ranks of their 2 enemy armies poised for battle. A bloodbath of even greater proportions seems inevitable. Then something remarkable happens. Ramses and the Hittite king both pull back from the brink. Instead, the 2 men agree to a truce. It is not what Ramses came for. He has failed to capture the Hittite prize. and now he must return home empty-handed.
Ramses is thinking, oh God, what have I done? I didn't win the day. I didn't even manage to capture Kadesh back. Nothing has gone the way I planned it. Now what do I do? How do I show to Egypt that I'm still the king, that I still should be king even? You know, what's going to make them believe that this isn't a complete disaster?
After just 5 years on the throne, Ramses' dream of becoming Egypt's greatest pharaoh lies in ruins. Ramses has been humiliated on the battlefield. Outmaneuvered by the Hittites, he's had to settle for a truce. But now, on his return to Egypt, he must find a way to save face.
Well, when Ramses gets home, this is going to be very embarrassing. He set out to conquer Kadesh, and he doesn't get it. So he has some explaining to do.
This is not the Egypt of Khufu's day. The pharaoh's no longer beyond criticism, and Ramses' failure to take Kadesh could dangerously undermine his position. Ramses hatches a face-saving plan, well suited to this more critical era. He reaches for another weapon, one even more effective than chariots and the bronze swords: propaganda.
This is a wonderful opportunity for Ramses to broadcast something to his audience that will make him the king that he will someday become.
Ramses commissions a series of stone reliefs to commemorate the Battle of Kadesh on temple walls the length and breadth of the kingdom.
So part of the heavy spin put onto the whole Kadesh campaign clearly is to make sure that his image remains what he wants it to be, that of the all-powerful, all-conquering pharaoh.
Well, when he sets up his record of the Battle of Kadesh, Ramses proves that he's the greatest spin doctor of the ancient world.
The carvings tell the story not of an inconclusive truce, but a clear-cut victory. Ramses is portrayed as the hero of the hour, who, separated from his troops, stands alone against the Hittite ambush.
He claims he wept him good, but he didn't.
He's not going to show what really happened. He's going to show what he wants to have happened. So the image that he has depicted there is one that shows him routing the Hittites pretty much single-handedly, leading the way, sending them fleeing, trampling them under his horses and chariots, and really creating a sense of Egypt, and Ramses himself as the personification of Egypt is the ultimate.
It's a political masterstroke. Ramses has rewritten history and set his version of events in stone for all time. But the young king's lifelong talent for self-promotion has only just begun. Abu Simbel, on Egypt's southernmost border with Nubia. In the 6th year of Ramses' reign, he has chosen this spot to build his own personal monument. Something so impressive, it will be admired long after his death. The age of pyramids is over. No longer can a pharaoh harness Egypt's economy and population to such an enormous project. Employing tens of thousands of men to quarry millions of tons of stone and build a monument block by block is just too costly. But Ramses has a plan. Here, overlooking the Nile, he will create a great temple, a shrine to himself and the gods. but it won't be built from quarried stone blocks. Ramses' monument will be carved out of the cliff face. The cliffs at Abu Simbel are good quality sandstone, ideal for the job, which will require a workforce of hundreds rather than thousands. But it will still take decades. (1284 BC). Highly skilled stonemasons start work at Abu Simbel. Their first task, to create 4 70-foot-tall statues of Ramses himself to guard the temple entrance.
The technical problems must have been amazing. You have to figure out how to scale these figures and carve them out of the side of the mountain. You have to put scaffolding up to support the workers that are going to do all this. You have to be able to envision these statues emerging from a raw mountainside.
The statues will embody Ramses' power and greatness. But they have another aim, one that links him with his predecessor, Khufu: the pursuit of immortality. Pharaohs are now laid to rest in secret underground tombs in the Valley of the Kings. But determined looters could still ransack tombs for their treasure and their mummies. In the face of this threat, Egyptian beliefs about how to achieve immortality have gradually changed. It's no longer essential that the pharaoh's mortal remains lie untouched for eternity. Nowadays, the power of the stone image offers Ramses an insurance policy.
By having his face and his name, these are magical symbols, symbols that have power, symbols that themselves have immortality in them. And so even without the tomb lasting properly and perhaps the mummy being moved out of the tomb or being destroyed even, there are still other means by which he can ensure that he is remembered and is eternal.
All of Ramses' dreams of eternal life rely on grand projects, and there are none grander than Abu Simbel. Just like Khufu, he must see it finished before his death. But he has only a tiny fraction of Khufu's workforce, and the tools for stone cutting have barely changed in the 12 centuries since the Great Pyramid. The only significant innovation is harder chisels made of bronze. As the statues begin to take shape, workers tunnel deep within the rock face. The finished temple will stretch 197 feet into the mountainside. Abu Simbel's interior must be precisely aligned to the movements of the sun. For Ramses is planning a spectacular surprise deep inside his temple. If it comes off, worshippers will be dazzled by a light show worthy of the gods for centuries to come. But Ramses cannot forget his humiliation at Kadesh. Several years into the build, he launches a new assault on the Hittites, striking deep into enemy territory. Soon he's locked in a series of frustrating battles, capturing cities only to lose control again as soon as his army marches on to new targets. Every time Ramses goes into battle, he takes a gamble. If he dies before his temple is finished, he risks his chance for immortality. He will be a failed and ultimately forgotten pharaoh. Ramses endures about 15 years of intermittent conflict with his old nemesis, the Hittites. Frontier towns pass back and forth, but neither can gain the upper hand. Eventually, the two sides sign the world's first peace treaty. True to form, Ramses uses it to spin his skills as a diplomat on the walls of the temple at Karnak. At last, he can dedicate his energies to his grand project at Abu Simbel. In his absence, hundreds of men have toiled, shaping this sheer mountainside into a monument fit for the pharaoh. In 1266 BC, Ramses has ruled for 24 years. At last, he can unveil his masterpiece, his bid for immortality.
Abu Simbel is a temple par excellence. It is a masterpiece. It has the king, it has the deities. It's fulfilling a particular function, the restoration of order, ensuring that chaos doesn't enter into the world. But it does it in an incredibly aesthetic way.
The temple is also an imposing warning to Egypt's neighbors to the south.
I don't think Abu Simbel is just a spectacular engineering feat built to the glory of Ramses and his godhood. It also serves as a stark warning to the Nubians in case they should rebel. It's a giant beware of Pharaoh sign.
Inside stands a spectacular avenue of 33-foot-tall statues of Ramses, evidence of his greatness and his stature as a living god. Deep inside the mountain, Ramses' brilliant trick of the light is unveiled. In the sanctuary, at the heart of the temple, sits Ramses, enthroned as a god alongside 3 other deities. Twice a year, at sunrise, the solar rays penetrate through the dim inner halls, almost 200 feet inside. Here they illuminate the deified Ramses and his companion gods. The message is unmistakable. Here, Ramses will overcome death's long night and live forever. Yet Abu Simbel will not be his last great project. Ramses, now feeling the hand of age on his shoulder, is not satisfied with a single monument.
So Ramses embarks on this huge building campaign. He's going to put temples throughout Egypt, from the north down to the south.
His builders erect hundreds of temples and giant statues, even a whole city. It's a nationwide insurance policy to cheat death.
Ramses' manic covering of monuments with his names and images may well be, at least partly, a desire to ensure that there's always be enough images of him left on Earth to guarantee his eternal life.
Despite a lifetime of warfare, Ramses lives to the astonishing age of 96. His death plunges the nation into mourning. He left nearly 100 children and more monuments than any other pharaoh before or since.
It must have been an unbelievable shock when Ramses finally died. You have to remember that he lived for 3 times the average lifespan of the typical Egyptian of his day. Imagine how traumatic that would be to lose a leader that had ruled you for that long, in which even your grandfather couldn't remember another king.
Ramses has served his country well, bringing his people 67 years of peace and security, continuing the magical harmony of Ma'at. Now priests preserve his body so he can use it when he reaches the afterlife. Ramses is ready for his tomb. Khufu's mummy was protected by a unique security system, utilizing massive slabs of granite. Ramses relies on being hidden from view in a secret tomb carved out of a mountainside in the Valley of the Kings. Whether or not their strategies to cheat the tomb robbers succeed won't be discovered for thousands of years. Ramses II has finally died at the age of 96. He has ruled over a secure and prosperous Egypt for 67 years, leaving a wealth of monuments. Although the empire flourishes for another 1,000 years, no single pharaoh reaches the stature of Ramses II.
I think one of the greatest testaments to Ramses' success as a pharaoh is that he had so many imitators. You have Ramses III through Ramses XI, several pharaohs that tried to imitate Ramses II, but none of them ever equaled him for the length of their reign or the greatness of their accomplishments.
Ramses' architectural achievements and those of Khufu 1,200 years before have never been matched. These two pharaohs bookend the empire's greatest period, and the contrasts in their lives illustrate a profound shift in Egyptian civilization. From an age of gods and absolute rulers to one of political maneuvering and warfare. Khufu was fortunate to live in a time of great stability, relatively free of the threat of invasion. The discipline and sacrifice of his workers reveal their gratitude to their god-king. And his pyramid leaves a surprising legacy for all his people.
Khufu's building of the pyramid, although on the one hand is this resurrection machine, it's also an economic machine. It's a way in which all of the population can be employed. It's ensuring that huge amounts of food are available. In order to feed the workforce itself, you have to have land, you have to have farming going on. And so there's an enormous development agriculturally throughout Egypt.
But the fundamental purpose of Khufu's pyramid was to deliver immortality. And to cheat the tomb robbers, he created the greatest fortress tomb in history. It would be visible for miles around. But its ingenious security system presented even the most determined tomb robber with a wall of impassable stone. (820 AD). An Arab caliph hunting for ancient treasure tunnels into the Great Pyramid. Meeting the first set of granite blocks, his men tunnel over them through the passageway's ceiling. And on reaching the slabs barring the entrance to Khufu's burial chamber, they simply chisel through the doorframe where the granite is thinner. But inside, they discover it empty. earlier raiders had gotten there first. After stripping the pharaoh's mummy of its valuables, they probably destroyed it. In the end, Khufu's lifelong mission to protect his remains for all eternity was doomed to fail.
Khufu is not having a good afterlife. The whole point in building this pyramid was to get into the afterlife. This was what was so important. And because his remains don't last, his job was completely unfinished.
The discovery of Ramses' ultimate fate would remain a mystery for another 1,000 years. On the 6th of July, 1881, Egyptologist Emil Brugsch is lowered down the sheer cliffs of Deir el-Bahri, near the Valley of the Kings, to the entrance of a cave. Inside, he discovers a secret cache of around 40 mummies. Inscriptions reveal them to be Egyptian pharaohs and their queens. After their original tombs were ransacked, they had been reburied without valuables to shed their appeal to tomb robbers. And one of them is the body of the man widely considered to be the greatest pharaoh of all time, Ramses II.
It is certainly ironic that having built this great monument, whose whole purpose was to preserve at its core the mummy of the pharaoh, Khufu's mummy is now lost. Yet Ramses II, who was buried in a far more modest sepulchre, did actually survive.
Ramses' mummy endured, perfectly preserved, for 3,000 years in the humblest of tombs. Scientific analysis has revealed that he was surprisingly tall for his time, 5 foot 7 inches. He had red hair in his youth, reproduced with embalmer's dye, and suffered from severe arthritis in his later years. But above the aged and worn body, his face still wears an expression of majestic supremacy. In the end, Khufu, who believed that preservation of the body was the only way to guarantee eternal life, failed in his quest. While Ramses' mummy survived, even though his immortality was guaranteed by his creations. Still, in many ways, they both live on.
In Khufu's terms, his soul has suffered because his body has been destroyed and his tomb was violated. But on another level, just because we know his name and his name was remembered throughout Egyptian history, his soul manages to live on.
The fact that we're sitting here today talking about Ramses II is, in a sense, exactly what he would have wanted. It is his immortality that's being achieved right here, right now.
The pursuit of immortality still burns bright in the human spirit and remains central to many religions. But the real way that Khufu and Ramses accomplished their goal lies in the sheer scale of their worldly achievements and the fascination and wonder that their great monuments still inspire. This is how, in the end, two powerful men triumphed over death to gain everlasting life.